So welcome back, everyone, to Body and Soul. And we've had a couple of weeks off, 1 week due to a sabbatical and 1 week due to COVID. Baruch Hashem, I'm almost better. And we want to thank Dr. Eleanor Gudis for making this class possible, just as she made the Radiant Torah class last year possible. We thank her very much. May it be a source of merit for bracha and hatzlacha and good health for her and her family. If you would like to add the name of someone to our chat, open up your chat column on the right-hand side, and we will keep them in mind for refuah shlema. And please feel free to type in a name. Okay, so today's class is in response to requests from many of you, many of you, who wanted me to go over the basics about the levels of the soul, the 10 spheros, the 10 sephirot, and the 5 elements. I want to remind everybody that I do have a 1-hour video on the basics of the soul. It's called Inside the Soul. It's on my YouTube channel, Chaya Rivka Zwolinski. I will, when I post this on YouTube, link to it at this point in the video. Okay, so the reason why this is important is because when we're talking about body and soul, we're talking about the soul. And I had made an assumption that people had a lot of reading background on this, and it was the wrong assumption to make. And plus, even if you have, it's always good to have a review. As a matter of fact, although I've been teaching this for years, when I went to review and prepare this particular module here, I realized there were things I had forgotten as well. And also I learned some new things. So we're going to begin with the Neshama, which is the Neshama is a level of the soul or an aspect of the soul, but it is also a descriptor that we use to describe the soul in general. And it is also a descriptor we use specifically to describe a Jewish soul. So it can be used in a lot of ways, both colloquially and technically. Okay, so where do we begin with the soul? We begin in Bereshis. We begin in Genesis, where in Genesis 2:7, where the Torah tells us, Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. Vayihi ha'adam lenefesh chayam. So, and he breathed. Okay, we know Hashem formed Adam, the first human being, out of dust, and he breathed into the apav, into his nostrils or his nose, the nishmas chayim, which I'm going to translate here as the soul breath of life, and ha'adam lenefesh chayim, and man became a living soul. He became a nefesh, okay? He blew in this neshama, and he became a nefesh. So this is going to be, for us, sort of our jumping off point. What we have to understand about everything we go through is that Hashem specifically and intentionally, and as a matter of fact, with ultimate purpose, blew our souls into our bodies, beginning with the first human being, Adam Harishon. And he blew this soul in order to give us life. Now, there are different types of life, okay? There are different types of creation that don't have something that we qualify as life. Okay, you have a rock. A rock is a creation. It even has its low level of lifelike existence, certainly according to the secret text, the Kabbalah. Water has a life. Okay, I'm not talking about the things within water. I'm not talking about the bacteria and the plankton and so on. I'm just talking about the water itself. But a human life is fundamentally and for a purpose very, very different. So we take that line from Genesis and we begin to understand that there is a connection between Hashem's breath, okay, the soul, and the animating force of all life. Now, a body is chomer. A soul is tsura, okay, form. A body is chomer, which is the material, the rough, the coarse, and the tsura is the form. And this is the soul, and it's refined and it's sublime. And it's what we call in English the spiritual. It's something we can't quite grasp. We all recognize it. Even the deniers recognize it. They recognize that they are a person. They have something that differentiates them between other creatures and other creations, although many will not admit it. So, of course, we have these movements, which it's important to mention briefly. I don't want to get into a lot of philosophy here, but we have movements like Darwinism, which say, oh, people came from apes. And the reason, the whole purpose of that movement, and certainly if you read Darwin, you know this to be true, is to take away the potential for connection with God as well as service of God by demeaning us, by putting us into a form or aligning us with or comparing us to a form of life that is less than us. We have, depending on the sage that you go by, we have two things that distinguish us from the animals. The first, everyone knows, that is dibur, we speak. But then the scientists, those purveyors of knowledge, tell us, well, whales have a language and dolphins have a rudimentary language, and you can teach a chimpanzee or a gorilla 300 words, and even a dog can be taught to respond to language, and so on. So we also know that man has something else, or human beings have something else. Okay, I'm not politically correct, so I'm used to saying man. What do we have? We have the power to choose, to make a choice, not a choice between vanilla and chocolate, although we may. A dog can make that choice. A bug can make that choice. A bug can make the choice between something he wants to eat and something that he doesn't want to eat. We have the choice to be able to make between something that moves us towards the light, something that moves us towards our source, the source that breathed life into us, as we mentioned in the beginning, and something that moves us towards death, God forbid, chas v'shalom, something that moves us to the darkness. Each of us has this choice. We get to make these choices many, many times per day. Without this godly soul that was blown into us, we wouldn't have a choice. We would be functionally like either the angels who can only choose good, or the animals that can only choose what is appropriate for their needs to maintain life. I'm not going to get to a discussion about do animals have kindness and so on and so forth. Yes, they do. But in general, okay, now, the form that the soul is, why is it called a tsura form? Doesn't make sense, right? A form, we think of a soul as sort of amorphous, but that's not true. Our sages tell us that the soul shapes the body, not the other way around. The soul itself gives form to the body. What does that mean? Does that mean my soul looks like me? In an essence, yes. What it means is that our souls not only enliven the body, animate the body, but give a light to the body that distinguishes one person from another, distinguishes one clump of clay from another. Where do we see this the most? Does anybody know? We see, what are the eyes called? The windows of the soul. When we look into someone's eyes, we can see the soul. Excuse me 1 second. I see somebody Naomi's having problems signing in. Okay, all right. We'll just deal with it. So we understand that we really have to pay attention to this, not only integration of body and soul, but to the differences between body and soul. Now, it is true, it really is true, that there are ways to view the body and soul as a unity, but this isn't necessarily the fundamental Jewish way. We understand that the body is here for a purpose. It is a garment of the soul. We slip into it. The Zohar HaKodesh says we slip into the body, the soul is slipped into the body, the way a foot is slid into a shoe, or we could say the way a person slips into a coat. Okay, that's really how we view the body. It doesn't mean we denigrate the body or we condemn the body, but what it does mean is we understand what is higher and what is the main animating force. It's not the body, it's the soul. Okay, so because you asked, I am going to go over the main levels of the soul. And because we began with Bereshis, and I read the verse from Genesis, I'm going to start top down so we understand the highest to the lowest. We will begin with the Yechida. The Yechida is a oneness. It's a uniqueness. It comes from the words Echad. It's related to the words Echad, which means one, and Yichud, which means it means a unity. It can also mean to be alone with. So the Yechida is where we are connected with Hashem and where we are connected in a unique way to Hashem. This is important because this is the ultimate place upon which we can have some measure of influence. Beyond that, okay, we go up and up and up and up. Beyond that, we lose our uniqueness and our experience of Hashem becomes just all oneness. But this is still a point of self, although 99.99% of people will not experience this. Hold on 1 second. Naomi is signing in. Again, let's see if we can get her in, see if we can make her co-host again. Let's see. Okay. If you would mind muting, please. Thank you. Okay. So this is the Yechida. Now, we are going to speak about certain aspects of the levels of the soul. We're not going to cover every aspect of every level. But in addition to the name, I want to speak about Hashem's name and what this has to do with the soul. So we're going to talk about Hashem's name, Yud K Vav K. Okay, everybody knows what that is. And we're going to tell you what the Yechida corresponds to. Now, the Yechida is the first or the fifth level of the soul, depending whether you're talking top to bottom, but there are only 4 letters in Yud K Vav K. So the Yechida has a special role. The Yechida corresponds to the absolute top point, the apex, the ultimate dot at the top of the Yud. When we make a Yud, if you draw a Yud, everybody, we could draw it like this, or we could draw it in the traditional way, that what we call the print way, which is actually the original way. We know that Hebrew came from print first, script second, not the other way around. When we draw this special way, there's a little dot and then it goes down. So the Yud has a little dot and it goes down. I didn't prepare a chart for this. I'm sorry. I had limited energy this week. So that dot, the second you put the pen to the paper, okay, you can all Google a Yud, a block print Yud, or pull out your Sefer Tehillim or a Siddur. That's where the name of Hashem corresponds to the Yechida. Okay. The next aspect of the soul we're going to talk about is the universe, which that level of the soul corresponds to. We can call it a universe or a world. The Yechida corresponds to the Adam Kadmon, the primordial human being. Okay. This is more about the tzora. Remember that word. Please keep in mind the terms we use, the form, rather than Adam Harishon, the first human being. This is the concept of the human being. And there is such a concept, and it's very, very holy. And this is the concept of the human being. Primordial means before recorded history, before history. This is the concept in Hashem's thoughts. I get chills when I think about this, because we know that for creation to have happened, for you to be here, Doris, or Nirala, or me, for any of us to be here, that Hashem had to think us, okay? Because he really not only spoke into life into creation, or creation into creation, but he thought into creation. And he's constantly thinking us into creation. And each of us is not only uniquely Chaya Rivka, or uniquely Nirala, or uniquely Doris, but each of us is uniquely connected to this template, so to speak, of Adam Kadmon, the primordial human being. So we have behind us the weight of not only our own individuality, but also the weight of Hashem's thoughts, of the template of what a human being is. And a human being is so important that in this model that we're describing today, a human being and the human genre in general is so great that it is a category of a world or a universe. Now, we all know each Jewish life is a world, okay? We know that each of us is a world. And each of us has our own geography. We have our own topography. We have our own climates. I call those the moods, our ups and downs, our climates and our weather and so on. Okay. But in addition to that, we are also connected to this incredible universe of the human being. There's something very differentiating about a human being from any other world or aspect of the world or any of Hashem's thoughts. Okay. Very, very powerful. This gives us a beginning of the sense of our purpose here. It's important. Okay. So after we've covered the name of the soul and the etymology of where that name comes from, and the letter of Hashem's name of that aspect of the soul and the world of that soul, I'm going to also cover a little bit about what that soul means. Now, there are many models for these levels of the soul, okay? We're using a mixture of Rav Chaim Vital, who was the Arizal's not only leading student, but he was a tremendous author and Kabbalist in his own right. What he did was he was able to express the Ari's teachings out there. That's really how we know the Ari's teachings. And also the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and also, of course, Rabbi Nachman and others. Excuse me. I expected, by the way, to come down with something while we're teaching this course, because whatever class, whatever issue we're working on, that's what we're all going to be working through, and me especially, because I'm going to be immersed in it all the time. So I am having a little health issue. Okay. So this aspect of Yechida that I want to speak about is the aspect of divine will and desire. This is the point, the Yechida, in which we differentiate that rudimentary, perhaps unformed, certainly we're not even aware of it, but that rudimentary will and desire that's our own, that is still connected to the divine will. Okay, now this may express in a way that pulls us away from the divine will or aligns us with the divine will. But it's such a point of beginning, like I mentioned before, the apex of the Yud and Yud K Vav K. It's such the nub of a beginning that it's very hard to define. It's very hard to conceive. However, if we want to get a little taste of it, we make Hitbodedut. Why? When we make Hitbodedut, which comes from the word badad, which means to be alone, we make a yichud with Hashem. We make a private seclusion, a unity in which we're alone with Hashem. And when we're alone with Hashem, we are alone with ourselves as well. And together, in this beautiful conversation of Hitbodedut, we talk to Hashem in our own words daily about whatever is on our mind and in our hearts. Okay? When we do this, what ends up happening is that we are able to get a glimmer, a shimmer, perhaps a moment where everything becomes clear. That moment doesn't always last, but it is a form of Ruach HaKodesh, says Rabbi Nachman, a slight moment of prophecy. And we have the experience, if we're so blessed, of being connected to that oneness that is Hashem. It usually is very momentary. It doesn't happen often. For some great tzaddikim, it may happen more frequently, obviously. But it's that point where we reach that hashmal, that border of silence, of chash and mal, of sound and silence. Our voice is given out, we've spoken. Before we take that next in-breath, we meet in that unity. And we experience, perhaps, the concept of the level of the soul that we've been talking about, called Yechida. Okay, we're going to move to the next level of the soul. Again, this is just an overview. It's an introduction. Okay, even the information that I know about the soul, we could talk for hours about it. Of course, there's Sfarim and Sfarim written on it. Okay, and still nobody has the absolute definitive description or model. Okay, next, we're going to go to the Chaya. So if you're named Chaya like me, okay, you may be happy to have this name because Chaya means the living essence of the soul, the life of the soul, the Chaya level of the soul. And again, the soul is like a animating force for the body. The Chaya is where that animation really begins, comes from or is related to the words Chai for life or Chaim, okay, and also the word for Chayus or Chayut, so life and life force. And this is not only our own life force, but the Chaya is where we connect to other neshamas, other souls. Okay, I'm using neshama colloquially now. So Chaya is not only your own personal life force, okay, but it's connected to all other Jewish souls. And it's important to recognize something amazing about this teaching. We think when we focus on ourselves and our souls and our life force, we think we're describing self. And we are. We're all unique. As I mentioned before, we're each a world unto ourselves. However, if we aren't connected to other Jewish souls, okay, then we really don't have chayut. We don't have this life force. We have to have that connection and maintain that connection. Now, we can do this consciously, we can do this unconsciously, and virtually every Jew will have some kind of connection to every other Jew. But in order to really feel that full-on force of life, I'm alive, you need to have that connection with others. How do you get that connection? It's so simple. It's so simple. It's not hard. You give to others. That's it. You give. Give your neighbor the cup of sugar she wanted to borrow if you have sugar in your home. You pray for others. You give tzedakah to others. You give money to others. You give your time to others. You give your love to others. There it is. You're connected. You build your life force through these connections. Don't think you can do this alone. Judaism is not something where we go off and meditate by ourselves for hours on end all the time. We can have our moments, okay? But the way to really polish a Jewish soul is by maintaining and building these connections. Okay, the Chaya connects to the Yud, okay? That's the whole letter Yud. Remember I said the Yechida was the apex of the Yud in Hashem's name. The Chaya is the Yud of Yud Kei Vav He, Vav Kei. The world that the Chaya is connected to is the world of Atzilus or Atzilut, which is translated as a world of nearness or emanation. This is the world that is the first emanations or outwards from Hashem, so to speak. Okay, describing things that are very difficult to describe. I'm not going to go too much into the worlds today because I really want to focus on the soul-body connection. And the Chaya is what we call the self. The Chaya is the self without delineation, the preconceptual mind. We're just mind, okay? A Chaya doesn't have a delineated thought where she thinks one thing this day, one thing another, and she consciously chooses to learn this and to do that. A Chaya is this concept of undifferentiated mind. This is your capacity for thought. And we are all given a capacity for thought, some more so, some others. Why would someone, it's an important question, and an important answer. Why would someone be given a greater capacity than someone else? Because one person might need a greater capacity for thought and mind and intellect than another in order to accomplish her mission in this world. One person might need another type of capacity in order to accomplish her mission in this world. So therefore, we know that we have children, very special, loving, wonderful children born with things like Down syndrome, who have this preconceived mind, this preconceptual mind not always, but often with a less defined ability to delineate thought, less capacity in some ways. And that's because their mission does not require that in this world and in this lifetime. This is the very Jewish way of looking at life. We do not value one life over another, certainly not to do with intellect. Okay, we might appreciate someone for their intelligence, their native intelligence. Okay, but we don't value someone more than someone else, which is why I want to get to this point as well, because this question does come up when we discuss these things, which is why we protect life, even life, let's say, of someone in a coma, even life that seems to the rest of the world as worthless because it's non-productive, okay? A Jew protects life because life is valuable. In any possible moment in time, a human being, any human being, Jewish or non-Jewish, can do a form of Teshuvah. It can come closer to Hashem. And therefore, we don't disregard life just because we can't personally make sense of it. This comes at every spectrum of life, from pre-birth to death, okay, or to pre-death, I should say. Okay, so we're not going to go too much into it today, but we see that the world has gone a little crazy with what they believe about life. And we see, for example, we just had a person, a famous businessman who was a Jew, who did what they call assisted suicide. It's we call it murder, okay? And we see the absolute disregard for the life in a womb. And so what we have to understand is that the Jewish view of life is committed, it's consistent. And somebody asked me, well, isn't there wiggle room? No, there's no wiggle room for life. As I mentioned before, we come from this very holy thought and concept of Hashem, the Adam Kadmon, the primordial human being. And this is so deeply connected with Hashem, it's his thought, that we have to appreciate every morsel and moment of human life. I really wanted to mention that because it's absolutely so incredibly important. Okay, so that is the Chaya and the value of life, again, from every end of the spectrum. And again, no, there's no wiggle room. It just isn't. Life is life. Now, when it comes to somebody on life support and things like this, there are different opinions and decisions. What I would like to encourage anybody who's dealing with a tricky situation, a medical situation, God forbid, is to please get a psak halacha, okay, a halachic legal decision that takes into account everything you or your loved one is going through. Please get a decision from an Orthodox Rav who is able to make such and render such a halachic ruling. Very, very important. Nobody wants to be involved in, God forbid, any possible smidgen of something that is disrespectful to life. Okay, next, the Neshama. We get to the Neshama, as I mentioned in the beginning, and the Neshama, okay, and the Neshima, which is breath, we'll talk about it in a minute. The Neshama is used for this level of the soul, but it's also used to describe a soul in general. It's used colloquially to describe a person. What a sweet neshama, we say about someone, or neshama, if we're using the modern pronunciation. And the neshama is also speaking about a Jewish soul specifically. Now, we're not going to get into whether a non-Jew has a neshama or not. These are questions. There's debates whether they have different levels of the soul than a Jew. For all intents and purposes, according to how we're going in this class, a life is a life, a soul is a soul, and all souls deserve to be allowed to live and to be respected for life. Okay, next, about the neshama. The neshama is the divine soul, okay? Specifically, yes, it's true, our teachers teach it's a Jewish soul. There are questions about this, there's debates about this, and it is related to the word neshima, which I said in the beginning when we quoted Bereshis, Genesis, breath. It's the soul that is breathed into us. Yes, the rest of the soul is breathed into us as well, but this one embodies the concept of breath the most because it also describes the way we live our life, okay? The way we breathe in our lives, our sense of self and who we are, and the way we breathe out and express what we've taken in. Very important, the neshama. It's also the aspect of the soul that we can generally begin to experience, because it's the aspect of the soul that defines personality and intellect and thought and mind. It represents the Yud Ke Vav Ke, it represents the first Hey of Hashem's name, okay? And I see somebody's trying to sign in. Hold on one second. The first Hey of Hashem's name, and it's connected to the world of Beria, okay, which is the world of creation, which is where all the initial happenings for creation took place in a way that we can relate to in terms of the Torah. Okay, I mentioned Genesis again in the beginning, which is of course where the soul begins as well. And it represents the thought and the intellect. Now, the neshama is something that we can act upon. It's not just something that is, okay? We do have an effect. The choices we make, okay, have an effect on all our aspects of our souls, okay? But the neshama is the one that takes the most abuse, pretty much speaking. When we make a choice that takes us away from that Yechida connection, okay, takes us away from that deepest, unchanging, but pulls us, it's yanking us away from that connection with Hashem, then our neshama is the one that bears the brunt of this. We can bang up and bruise our neshama. We can do this through subsequent lifetimes. We can come back here to rectify the things that we need to rectify in our neshama in this lifetime. Okay, this is where our impact of choice is so important. The reason why it's thought and intellect and choice, I'm going to say something that many of you know and many of you do not know. Okay, I know this because I know that literally most people who are new to Breslov thought, to studying Torah in this way, and to studying the secrets of the Torah, don't realize is that we control our thoughts. We are also our thoughts to a large extent. Okay, we are defined by them, yet we control them. Where the I is and where the thou is, we're not going to get into that. It's confusing at best. It's a paradox too. But what we can say is we all recognize we have an I, and we all think at one point in our lives, certainly when we're children, that our thoughts just come and go. They just blow in the wind. This is not the case. We each have the power of choice. That's the meaning of bechira, the power to choose, free will. The meaning is to choose first with your thoughts. If you have an apple and you have an orange and you want the apple and you reach for the apple, your bechira doesn't begin with the reach, or it doesn't begin with the grabbing hold of the apple, it doesn't begin with the eating of the apple. It begins with that thought, the neshama consciousness of, I get to choose. I get to choose between the apple and the orange. I choose the apple. So our thoughts, I hope everybody understands this. It's, again, if we dig too deeply, we're going to end up looking into a funhouse mirror that's going to distort our sense of what it means to choose. You have to take it on a certain measure of faith that this is the role of the neshama, as well as the neshama's purpose in terms of being acted on. Every choice we make changes the neshama. Interesting. Okay. And may or may not bring us closer to our rectification in this lifetime, may or may not serve us personally. We're people. We can make a choice that serves us, okay, that serves us by bringing us closer to Hashem. The Neshama is our personality as well, okay? Now, many years ago, before I understood all this, and it's not like I understand it all completely because no one does. I remember thinking as a child, I was an unusual child. We each were unusual and unique in our own way. But I remember thinking about 8 or 9 years old about existence. And I remember thinking, what happens when you die? Do you get stuck where you were at that point in your existence? I don't know why Hashem put that thought in my head, but it was a question I had throughout my life. Is that when you die, is that who you are for eternity? Okay, and the answer, surprisingly, is yes and no. Yes, in that the aspects of your soul that came down in this configuration, in this lifetime, will have no more room for growth once you leave your body. And please God, it should be after 120, okay, after 120 years, so you could say amen, okay, and also at the same time, sometimes people come back in different configurations and they get a chance to repair a certain aspect of their soul that was banged up or damaged or schmutzed up in a previous lifetime. This is not the same thing as karma, chas v'shalom. There are similarities. It's true. Okay, we do something, and then there might be a consequence that we need to correct, but there also may not be. Why is that? We have something that the poor Hindus, who I really feel sorry for, with all due respect, don't have. And they could have it if they wanted to, okay? Because it's just a question really of belief and action. We have the power to do Teshuvah. We have the power to correct what we've done that we wish we hadn't done in this lifetime. How do we do Teshuvah? It's a whole topic, but in brief, first, we have to stop whatever it is we're doing that's pushing us or yanking us away from Hashem and His light. Second, we have to feel remorse and express remorse. We actually verbally confess it to Hashem. Hashem, look what I did. I can't believe I did that. Maybe I knew better. Maybe I didn't know better. But Hashem, my heart hurts that I did something that pulled me away from you, and I'm ashamed. That's healthy shame, not toxic shame. Because healthy shame moves us to positive action. Okay. And then we get to say, I want to correct this, Hashem. Please forgive me. I want to correct this. We correct it. Of course, we stop that negative action. Sometimes we can make reparations in this lifetime. You stole a pencil for somebody, go out and buy them a pencil or a pack of pencils, okay? Whatever it is, you hurt someone's feelings, apologize from the depths of your heart. You're hanging on to a grudge, forgive the person, let it go. Okay, there are all kinds of aspects to Teshuvah that give us what those poor Hindus don't have, getting stuck in that karmic cycle. We don't have that. We have the ability to correct virtually everything in this lifetime. The Talmud tells us that about people who did complete and total tshuva on their deathbed and didn't have to come back. Okay, we don't necessarily want to have to come back in this configuration. We only want to be able, we really only want to have to come back and please God. And at this late stage of the game where Mashiach is around the corner and we're said to be the last generation, we only want to come back into Chiyas HaMesim, in the resurrection of the dead. Okay, when we come back to life and we experience the delights of having Surah, remember that term, the form and the chomer, and the chomer, not the donkey, the chomer, the material aspects of ourselves, when the form, when the soul becomes stronger and brighter and lighter, what is secular world calls the light body. That's what we want to come back for, not this chance to make so many mistakes again. Okay, we're going to continue with the Ruach, excuse me. Okay, the Ruach is commonly, did I do everything on the Neshama? Yes, well, not everything, it's an overview. The Ruach is a spirit. Ruach also means wind and air. Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan Zal tells us that it also means direction. And so what does that mean? Wind and air and direction. Okay, that's the correlation to the word. So what is direction? Interesting. Direction is very much bound up in choosing. When you go in a direction, either you're being blown by the wind, as I mentioned before, or you're making a choice to go in a certain direction. I choose the apple on the right, not the orange on the left. Okay? As a matter of fact, the teachings, it's not just a folk saying, but we know in Judaism that we're taught that if you come to a crossroads and you're lost, you don't know which way to go, don't ask Robert Frost. Rely on our sages who say, always make a right. Always choose the right. We have in Judaism a way of getting dressed in the morning. You get dressed on the right side first. You put on your right shoe first, and so on. We do this, okay? We're not trying to out-zen the Zens. We're not just trying to be aware and conscious. We are making a choice to begin our day by choosing to go to the right. The right side, it's no accident, the right side of our body also means right as incorrect. The totally non-Jewish world recognizes this as well. Okay, recognizes this as well. Okay, so the Ruach is this wind and air and its direction, as I mentioned, and its choice. It's involved in choice, like the Shama is, but it's also where we are held accountable as well. So whether we go for the model that says all human beings have a neshama, or just a Jew has a neshama, we can debate the models. We know that all human beings, for sure, without debate, should have a ruach. They should have. And when you have a ruach, an animating force called a ruach, the spirit, that means you are held accountable for your choices. Each person to a different extent. I mentioned before, children with Down syndrome, because they have certain limitations. They would not have the same accountability as someone who has a vast education and a greater native intellect, okay? Yet we still all have accountability for our choices. There is no such thing as walking into a store and stealing $999 worth of goods versus stealing $1,001 worth of goods and being off the hook for the $999 versus the $1,001. This, of course, is now the law in the wonderful, I think it's the entire state of California, but it might just be San Francisco. Can you imagine? Okay. No, you're held accountable. Whether you steal $1, $999, or $1,000 or $1,001. There's an accountability factor there. And it does not take into account anything other than your choice. Does upbringing, does what you're taught being taken into account? Yes, to a certain extent, it's true. If you grew up in a den of thieves, you probably don't totally have consciousness that thievery is wrong. Okay, probably not. Yet still there is a basic fundamental human law that is ingrained into all of us, that there's such a thing as property rights. We know this from the Noahide laws. Okay, we know this from the pre-Mabul, pre-flood era. Why was the pre-flood era punished in such a terrible way that they were wiped out? For a couple of reasons. Most people think it's because of immorality between illicit marriages and the legalization of illicit marriages and illicit relationships and all kinds of disgusting things. That's part of it. But our sages also tell us that it was because people would steal from each other. They loved to steal. They would steal even small amounts for the joy of ripping someone else off. Okay. So all of humankind has the innate knowledge that this is wrong, and we are all held accountable to different extents, but we are all held accountable. If we have a Ruach, and certainly we all have a Ruach, we are all held accountable for these kinds of things. We can talk more about this another time. Next, the Ruach. Okay, the corresponding letter for Yud K Vav K is the Vav. Again, we're not getting into too much of the meaning, but I wanted you to have the correspondence. The world, okay, the world of the Ruach is the world of Yetzira, which is the world of formation, where formation begins. Okay, you will recognize the word I said before, tsura, form, in that root, Yetzira. And also Ruach, because it is wind and air, it's highly connected with the faculty. Excuse me, one moment. I see a lot of people are signing in at the end of class. So if you are just signing in at the end of class now, you just know it will be posted on YouTube, God willing. So anyway, it's very much the Ruach level of the soul. It's connected with this faculty of speech and communication. The windpipe, excuse me, and the vocal cords are connected. If you know any singers, you will know that breath is everything, or wind instrument players, or even string instrument players also have to work on their breathing. So do people who speak for a living, of course, these are all important. It's all combined with communication. Okay. So I remember when I was a little girl, my mother was very involved with building the Garden State Art Center in New Jersey. And we used to have world famous conductors, musicians, and opera singers at our house. And one of the things the opera singers would do would be to do breathing exercises, not just practice scales and things, but ha, 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 make these laughing noises. And that would be the better to communicate with. Okay, finally, we come to, excuse me, the Nefesh, what we call the lowest level of the soul. This really, according to some models, remember how I described the soul as being a shoe jammed into a foot jammed into a shoe, as the Zohar Kodesh says, and that the bulk of the soul is like the leg and the body reaching up to the heavens, way, way, way out of our body, and just the tiny little foot is in the body, and the body is the shoe, then everything else is going up, up, up. So some models say that this is the Nefesh, where the Nefesh resides, the indwelling soul and life force that is animating the body, and everything else is being filtered down through the various levels of the soul, according to one model, according to another model. The Nefesh is the innermost core, and then the other aspects or levels of the soul go outwards, going up and up and out and out. Okay, a lot of ways to look at this. For our purposes, all we really need to know is that our souls are animating our bodies, and they're connected, and everything we do in this body impacts the soul. Okay, and the Nefesh is related to the word. It's related etymologically to Nefesh, which means to rest. and specifically the Nefesh resides in which part of us? Does anybody know? We know this. Where do we know this from? It's I know it's in Devarim, but I think it's Parshas Re'eh. It's where we talk about spilling the blood of an animal. Okay, a Jew is not allowed to eat blood because the life force, which retains a holiness, it retains a semblance of that surah, that form, that holy spirituality, lives in the blood. Okay, so we are very careful not to consume blood for the health, not only of the soul, but also of the body. It can affect us physically as well. Obviously, anything that affects the soul affects the body and vice versa. It's very important to drain, to kosher meat, to salt it, to wash it off the salt, to drain off all the blood. Now there's certain layers of blood that you might see red liquid, but we're told if you're following the proper way to kosher, that liquid doesn't technically contain the nefesh, the residual liquid. Now nobody today koshers their meat. I remember very, very vividly as a young girl that not only my mother would kosher liver and meat at that point. I remember at some point it was a big revelation in the 70s when the butchers started koshering meat for us. But I remember my grandmother and my grandfather pulling out tons of chickens for simchas or whatever and koshering them, sprinkling salt all over, or pieces of beef. And they had a draining board. I don't know if any of you have ever seen this. It looks like a metal washboard. That may even have been what they used. I don't know if anybody's ever seen a washboard. That's something that's definitely a relic from before my time. And they would hold it in a certain area into a tub and kosher the meat, and the blood would drain. And then it would be rinsed off. And this has to be done fresh. The meat is not allowed to age much for so much time after slaughter, because otherwise it will be absorbed into the flesh. Okay. Very important for your health to eat kosher meat if you eat meat. Okay. So the nefesh rests in the blood. The actual Torah says that the blood is the soul. Again, I think it's Parshas Re'eh. What I have here is Deuteronomy 12:23. Ki hadam hu hanafesh. Okay. Because the blood is the soul. We do not want to put that into our body. It can negatively affect us. Okay, next, it also corresponds to the final letter of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. It corresponds to the final Hey in Hashem's name. It's the Nefesh is the world of Asiya, action and completion. It's action. The world as it is down here, the lowest world. Certainly, all human beings have the capacity, according to most models, all human beings have the capacity to reach and express that level of Ruach. Does most of the world remain at the level of action, at the level of the Nefesh? Very possibly. When people are in fight and flight situations, when people live to satisfy their pleasures and desires alone, they remain at the nefesh level. Now, I had wanted to get to some other things today, but we finally got our overview of the levels of the soul. Again, I want to remind everybody to please visit my YouTube channel, Rivka Zwolinski. It's very easy. You can look it up and see the class video, 1 hour video, or maybe even longer than 1 hour, called Inside the Soul, where I discuss this and the elements. Okay. Finally, we got to that. Are there any questions or comments before we sign off for today?
Yeah, hi, this is Judith.
Hi, Judith.
Yeah, so probably I'm the only one on the chat that can relate to your koshering. I was a little girl in Romania, and my mother used to buy a chicken once a week. I was the one, maybe I was 10, 11, going on 25, but going to the shochet, walking, and then holding the wings, once the shochet shechted the chicken, so that the blood doesn't get splattered over the feathers, because then the skin would rip. And I knew how to do all that. And so I remember all that, but, people cannot really relate to these things, going to the shochet, chefing the chicken, then, coming home, then the mother, kashering it, cutting it, and whatever you said, the proper way. Now everything is ready, everything is in the supermarket. People think that that's how things come,
That's right.
packaged in the supermarket.
So if you have grandchildren, you should teach them how to do it, because I'm telling you, we all really need to learn how to do this, because my husband's studying Shechita and he's also learning this. And I'm so happy, because I did learn how to kosher liver, but that's it. We really should know how to do this. God forbid, look at the supply chain shortages. Suppose you can get the meat, but the cow, but you can't get the koshering, So it's excellent. Judith, thank you for sharing your memory with us.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else, any comments or questions? No? Okay. So before I go, I do want to again thank Dr. Eleanor Budas for sponsoring this year. And I would also like to ask, it's very difficult for me to do this, but if you are enjoying these shiurim, you are enjoying the books and the classes and the programs and so on, we lost our main sponsor last year. And it's been very difficult. And in the past 6 months, it gets more and more difficult each month. Baruch Hashem, somehow every month we get through. But I need a massive tech upgrade, and among some other things, in order to keep bringing programs to you. And if anybody would like to sponsor our upcoming special events or daily mini lessons, which are $36 a daily mini lesson, $180 for a week of sponsorships or dedications. You can dedicate to whomever you want for any reason, refuah shlema, in memory of someone, in honor of someone, and it would be much appreciated. And if you would like to reach me about that, you can text me at 914-758. I don't remember the rest of my number, 9968. I think I'm going to write that down for you, 914-758-9968. Or if you would like to develop any special programs yourself, welcome to. And also, I do have a new I only take a few coaching clients per week. I do have an opening. Somebody, Baruch Hashem, is making aliyah. I'm very happy for her. She's doing great. And if I have one opening, and if anybody's interested, just contact me. And I wish you all a wonderful week. Tomorrow we have Psalms for Life at 11 a.m. And I hope to see you there. If you'd like to join, we're on Psalm 28, and it's a really beautiful psalm, similar to 27, but with some unique differences. And Naomi, thank you so much for being co-host and letting everyone in. I appreciate it. Tiskala mitzvahs. Take care, everyone. Take care. All the best.